She's gone, she's out. Angela Rayner did not pay enough tax on a property she purchased, and so she has had to resign as the UK's Deputy Prime Minister, and that has prompted a big reshuffle of the Labour government. So who's in and who else is out? That is what we're going to discuss on this episode of Newscast, the BBC's daily news podcast. It's James in Glasgow.
And it's Chris at Westminster.
And it's Laura in Birmingham in classic newscast style. And I'm just going to get this out there, talking to you with my phone balanced on top of a bin.
It's very on brand for Newscast, Laura. Well done. Chris, since yesterday, 24 hours ago or thereabouts, you were sitting in a chair right next to me in the studio in Glasgow. What's happened between then and now?
Well, rather a lot, as it turns out. So Friday is traditionally a relatively quiet day, certainly quiet weekday in politics. And what do we manage to have? A major party conference going on in Birmingham with Reform. Oh, and then a Westminster act in two parts. So a morning and lunchtime dominated by Angela Rayner and the delivery of the verdict of the independent advisor on ministerial standards, on the whole business of the stamp duty and the two properties, etc., which we've discussed at length on Newscast, followed by, as that was happening just after midday, Downing Street making it clear that they were doing what was described to me then, and it turned out it was, a widespread reshuffle. Now, they said in that first instance, conscious that the opposite would have led to a lot of speculation, that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was staying in her place. I think they were acutely aware that that kind of speculation they really, really didn't want, given that they weren't going to be moving her. But from then on, I was on the phone to all sorts of folk all afternoon. There was jeopardy in every corner of Whitehall because people were trying to work out what was happening. The scale of it was clearly significant, even though there's plenty of post holders in big jobs in government who in the end haven't moved. There's one heck of a lot of people who have. And so as we were just reflecting there, yes, the government, the Prime Minister was talking about phase two when he was talking to Matt Chorley on 5 Live at the beginning of the week. Yes, there's been talk of a reshuffle coming for some time, but the timing of the reshuffle and the scale of the reshuffle fast-forwarded as a result of circumstances the Prime Minister would have much, much rather obviously not had, which has been this rolling saga around Angela Rayner.
Exactly. And but let's do some detail of that just to wrap it all up before we get into the reshuffle then, Chris.
Yeah.
In terms of Angela Rayner. So this really all came down to the findings of this advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, who'd been looking into what she had done and how she had behaved and whether that was in keeping with the standards that are expected of ministers. What did his judgment come down to?
So he said that, yes, when she originally bought this flat in Hove in East Sussex, she had sought advice around what the liability for stamp duty would be, as she had said that she had, but that she hadn't followed the logic of that advice, which was to seek more specialist tax advice because of the curiosity of the arrangement that she and her ex-husband have with their property in Greater Manchester in Ashton-under-Lyne, where she had sold her stake in it to a trust for her disabled child. And when you look at the specifics of the rules around stamp duty in England relating to that circumstance, even though you can say accurately that you only own the one home, in Angela Rayner's case, the place in Hove, because the other one is owned by this trust, because of the connection between her and that trust, that did make her liable for the higher rate of stamp duty, which is charged on second or third or multiple additional homes. And so for that reason, Sir Laurie Magnus concluded that she hadn't been sufficiently diligent and therefore concluded she had breached the ministerial code. Now, it's worth saying, he said that he believed that she had acted with integrity. There was some warmth towards her in that letter, but ultimately a devastating final critique. And Sir Laurie, in his reports, is known for getting to the point when it comes to it and leaving little ambiguity. And he didn't leave any ambiguity. She had broken the ministerial code. And on that basis, she resigned, with the Prime Minister making it clear in his letter to her, to Angela Rayner, that she had made the right decision. In other words, the Prime Minister was also of the view that her continuation in government would have been unsustainable.
And talking of that letter, that handwritten letter, Laura, quite a lot of warmth between the two of them who, they've been so close, of course. And what did you, we always do this, the letter decoding after resignations.
Even reading
what do you think?
Thing.
Well, I think it's interesting because actually, Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner have worked closely together, but they haven't always gotten on and they haven't always seen eye to eye. And there has been a lot of grit in the oyster. Let's be clear about this. From time to time, Angela Rayner and her team, or maybe sometimes just Angela Rayner's allies and the people around her, have absolutely rubbed up people in the wrong way at the very, very top of the Labour Party in terms of Number 10 and other allies of other ministers. She's not someone whose outspoken style always finds fans and gratitude. There is a very good big constituency of support for her and Labour members. That's absolutely true. And we know she's one of those politicians with that elusive currency of, cut through, to use the jargon. In other words, people notice her, they listen to what she said. But they're not people who've been necessarily natural allies. They're more like colleagues who maybe used to bristle, but they found a way of working together because they were in these big important positions and they had one big common goal, which was winning an election and then being in a position to run the country. The letter, though, as you say, they did have warm words for her. It's interesting that, repeatedly Keir Starmer has singled out Angela Rayner's background and paid tribute to the journey that she's made from having a tough time as a young person and making it all the way to the top of the British establishment. I've got to say, though, also, and I don't know, Chris, if you hear this too, when you talk to MPs about all of this, some of them get quite fed up by that.
Yeah.
One of them said to me today, look, a lot of us had a hard time growing up. We don't always bang on about it. I had a baby at 16. So what was one of the MPs I spoke to this morning said about Angela Rayner. And some of them even suggested, because she's quite a divisive figure in the Labour Party as well as among the public, one of them even told me there's an element of karma in all of this. So while I think Keir Starmer's sort of sadness is very much being briefed by Downing Street as being genuine, you could see it there in that letter, this isn't a straightforward tale of sympathy for Angela because she tried to do the right thing. She just didn't try quite hard enough. There are some people in her own party who feel quite differently about that. And let's just also pause for a second to remember what is incredibly toxic, whoever the politician is for the public, the mixture of politics and money. It can look tawdry, it can look seedy, it can look sleazy. And I'm not casting aspersions over what happened here, but the impression in that mixture of politics and money can be incredibly poisonous. What we're seeing now tonight, as we're recording at 7 on Friday, is Keir Starmer trying to make the best, trying to take the opportunity out of what was a crisis.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, James, as we were reflecting, I think, on the earlier edition of Newscast when the two of us were sitting next to each other in Glasgow, yes, there is elements of complexity in the story around Angela Rayner in the last couple of weeks, but actually, as Laura was saying, it boils down to money and property, and also it boils down to a then housing secretary and houses and tax in a government that is putting up taxes, and that has a sort of the capacity for kind of universal understanding. As far as Angela Rayner is concerned, just picking up on your observations, Laura, I was really struck in the last couple of days, even those who, in many senses admire Angela Rayner, even like her, have become growingly frustrated, not just in this instance, but going back a while, about, as they would see it, her capacity to attract negative headlines. Now, there are those who will say that in their view, they think sometimes some newspapers have kind of been out to get her, but they also will say, sometimes in the same breath, but she's made that all too easy for them too often.
Yeah. Now, Chris, so politics is brutal. And in a way, now, immediately, Angela Rayner doesn't matter. I don't mean it doesn't matter at all, but in terms of the direction of travel, the political narrative, the future of the government. So the big question, which Laura was hinting at there as well, is how damaging is all of this for Sir Keir Starmer. And we'll come into what he's trying to do and how he's reshaping his team in a sec. But just before we go through the reshuffle, how bad a moment is this for him?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is that he wouldn't have done this today or on this scale if it wasn't for what had happened in the last couple of days. This was not what they were intending to do. Now, that's not to say there weren't conversations going on, and there haven't been conversations going on for a long time about a potential reshuffle. There have. So in that sense, that was an ongoing conversation. There was a discussion about its scale and there was a discussion about its timing. But this is absolutely a Prime Minister confronted by a sort of bleak situation where this reset, this phase 2, had been entirely knocked off course almost instantly by all of the headlines about Angela Rayner, who was grappling to try and look like he could exert some authority around it and help shape the conversation. And, he's achieved that in the very short term because we're talking about the shape and makeup of his government and not merely sort of yet another update on Angela Rayner. I think it's also an acknowledgement that relatively early on in this government, he is recognising that it's been a bumpy start, that the speed with which Labour have lost support has been significant, that reforms rise and rise in the opinion polls and the stickiness of that rise has been persistent, and they need to be seen to be delivering and delivering pretty soon. And I think he's concluded that in reshaping his team, he hopes that can help do that. And obviously, the only real test of that will come down the track.
Yes, and so let's just do the reshuffle. Let's get into it, and I'll just go through some of the key moves, and then we can maybe break them down bit by bit. I'm not going to list. I've got this huge list from your colleagues at Westminster of everyone, but let's not do everyone. The headlines: David Lammy out of the Foreign Office, takes over Justice and becomes Deputy Prime Minister. Shabana Mahmood from Justice moves to become Home Secretary. Yvette Cooper moves from that job to replace David Lammy at the Foreign Office. So David Lammy, Deputy PM and Justice, Shabana Mahmood, Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, Foreign Secretary, which means that that's the first time in history that 3 of the 4 great offices of state, the other one, of course, being Prime Minister, are held by women. The Chancellor not moving, Rachel Reeves. A few others really quickly: Pat McFadden to work and pensions, Peter Kyle going to business, Liz Kendall to science, Douglas Alexander back to the Cabinet as Secretary of State for Scotland. That'll probably do to be going on with. Which one do you want to start with, Chris?
I think we should just mention a couple of others in big jobs that are not moving. So Ed Miliband, Wes Streeting, Bridget Phillips and John Healey, in addition to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, staying where they were. Who shall we
David Lammy?
Pick out?
Is that a demotion?
Yes. Well, it's interesting. So I heard one or two on a classic day of Westminster intrigue. You hear all sorts of sort of rolling commentary from all sorts of different sources and try and patch stuff together. It's sometimes rather piecemeal to try and work out what's going on. Let's put it like this: had David Lammy moved from the Foreign Office to Justice without the additional moniker of Deputy Prime Minister, it would have definitely been a demotion. Him becoming Deputy Prime Minister alongside that, I suppose, is something. Well, it's something else, isn't it? Alongside being Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, very, very highly rated in Downing Street, into a very prominent position within the party, particularly in of course, the raging debate around what the government's managing or not managing to do on small boats, but then also within the Labour movement, the arguments that rage around Gaza and the conflict in the Middle East and the threat that plenty of Labour MPs face in constituencies with a significant Muslim population from those who are unhappy with Labour's stance on the Middle East. And there we have in Shabana Mahmood somebody very prominent now in a big office of state. The one other I would mention, just because there's a sort of symmetry around where the story was this morning, Steve Reid becoming the new Housing Secretary, so taking that element of Angela Rayner's old job with that big promise of trying to deliver 1.5 million homes in England by the end of the Parliament, and no longer having farmers chasing him down the street, asking about their inheritance tax.
Exactly. And that's important for newscasters, Laura, isn't it? Because the question people probably have, and newscasters will have, it's intriguing seeing all these comings and goings.
Sure.
But we want to, people want to know what it means and what it means in policy terms. And will Yvette Cooper and her handling of Trump change foreign policy for the UK? Will Shabana Mahmood, as Home Secretary, change the approach to immigration?
So there are three things that I would pick out, I think. One is Downing Street. Well, there are three things that I would pick out. Allies of Keir Starmer hope that Shabana Mahmood will massively increase the grip and the sort of level of activity and energy around trying to solve the small boats. Yvette Cooper's allies, though, think, oh, well, brilliant. Her promotion to Foreign Secretary to this big job with all the baubles and lovely international travel and all these huge kind of moments of statecraft, that shows that she got great respect from going around the world doing deals on migration, like the returns agreement with France, which people had tried to strike for years and never got it. I think the reality of what we've seen here is that, and before I pick that out, I'm going to pick out two others, talk to other people, and the sense that I've got from other people in number 10 tonight is actually what's the thing that's been a real nightmare, getting the economy to grow. So look at Pat McFadden, who they really respect as a wily political operator, being moved into welfare and skills, and Peter Kyle being moved into the business department. So others will point to growth being really important now for this government. Others would say, immigration is what it's all about, and Shabana Mahmood's promotion there. But my sense really is this is not going to usher in any huge, big changes in policy in terms of the things that might change all of our lives. But what this is really about from the conversations I've had is it's about getting the right personalities in place. In other words, people who number 10 really has faith will be able to do the jobs that they've been asked to do, and maybe moving some people out or aside who've been maybe a little bit awkward or not quite been willing to go with the number 10 script.
And there's also going to be a race for Angela Rayner's other job, which is deputy leader of the Labour Party. Is this going to be yet another of those battles for the soul of Labour that we've seen over decades in British politics?
Well, the big risk for Keir Starmer that happens because, frankly, with the public and also inside the Labour Party itself, there are real doubts about Keir Starmer, frankly. We know from polling that the public doesn't see him as a popular prime minister who's doing a good job in this moment in 2025. In the Labour Party, we know from all the revolts we've seen and the disquiet, he's not seen as a universally popular figure at the moment. So there's a big risk there. If we spin back, I think one of the interesting things about David Lammy's appointment as the deputy prime minister is someone suggested to me that David Lammy sort of will give him a bit of a shield from whoever might then be deputy leader of the Labour Party. There's somebody who is very well known in Labour figures, who's been outspoken on lots of issues over the years as David Lammy. He can maybe be a bit of a political bodyguard as deputy prime minister against a potential deputy leader who might stir the party against him. And that's how it was expressed to me. But Chris, we're in that phase, aren't we, where there's all sorts of kind of people turning the kaleidoscope and trying to see what that picture adds up to. And this, a few senior people tonight I've talked to who've given me completely different verdicts on what this reshuffle actually means.
Oh, completely that. And to answer your question directly, James, about the kind of it opening up the internal machinations within the Labour Party, yes, it does, the whole deputy leadership thing. And there's one or two folk I've been speaking to, some within government, some beyond it, who would be absolutely delighted if the contest just didn't exist, if there wasn't a deputy leader of the Labour Party itself, because the very nature of a conflict of a contest opening up a very public debate about yes, views about the Prime Minister, yes, views about the government, and then the breadth of argument within the wider party. But it's quite a hard thing for you to not have when it looks like you're sort of withdrawing a democratic element of the party's structures. But yeah, I mean, absolutely on that broader point, the sort of analyses as to what this means, for the government, for its direction, for its communication, for the individuals, are as almost as numerous as the phone calls that we're all making, really.
Yeah, and back to that point about what newscasters might experience as a result of any of these changes. I was really struck by something that our colleague Ian Watson, your colleague at Westminster, Ian, was saying. He said that some Labour critics had been saying, look, we've got Keir internally, privately, saying we've had Keir Starmer talking about delivery, delivery, delivery. Tony Blair talked about education, education, education. Delivery is a mechanism. Education is a goal. And that what is Labour's goal? And maybe that debate opens up again in that deputy leadership contest and or beyond.
I think it'll absolutely be at the heart of that deputy leadership contest. And the reshuffle moves don't silence that debate much more broadly, because it talks to what has been the main criticism of Keir Starmer since day dot, not just as Prime Minister, but as opposition leader, is that it can be hard to work out what he actually stands for. And, a prominent figure who's involved in all of this, and I would never dream of revealing my sources, said to me, I don't see how any of this actually solves what the hardcore problem here is. It's what's the project. And moving people around to be more effective might well create a more effective government. It might have people who are more able to demonstrate achievements in various different areas. Who knows? Put it together with the changes in the Downing Street machine. That's obviously what they hope. What it doesn't do is suddenly give the country a sense of, oh, okay, these guys are all about education, or these guys are going to do everything on immigration and forget about everything else for the moment, or they're all about growth, or they're all about this, that, and the other. And it doesn't give them a script. It may well change things. They might become more effective. They might be able to win back public support that way, but it doesn't fundamentally change who Keir Starmer is as a politician.
Yeah. I think exactly that, and therefore you wonder, particularly as they sort of try and flesh out, what phase 2/3/whatever it is this autumn, and particularly in the context of the countdown to the budget, and also that reshaping, if you like, reshuffle within Number 10, within the Number 10 operation that was announced the other day. What a combination of all of those things amounts to, and do we begin to see? And it's the big question that's forever asked by plenty of observers, but also by plenty of people within government and within the wider Labour Party. Do we begin to see them offering a kind of sharper definition of what they're all about?
And also, Chris, how might that affect the battle with opposition parties? I mean, Kemi Badenoch has been talking about all of this being a distraction from the profound economic crisis the country faces because of the Prime Minister's decisions. But actually, I mean, the reform is as much of a concern, if not more of a concern, in Downing Street. Does the reshuffle, do these personnel, does what we've been hearing today tell us anything about how the Labour government plans to tackle the challenge from the right?
They're very, very alive to the challenge from reform. There is no doubt about that, and are increasingly sort of tilting their arguments in the direction of reform, and trying to frame an argument that says that the current political tussle is between Labour and reform. Going back to our earlier conversation about Shabana Mahmood, and some of the things she's had to say that to some within the Labour Party have been seen as quite sharp, quite on the right, really, on all sorts of issues. I remember the remarks she had about the chemical castration of paedophiles, for instance. She is seen to be hard, and they mean that as a positive. And there she is in the Home Office. Can she, as Laura was saying a few minutes ago, grip a difficult department to grip, take on what is undeniably an incredibly thorny and difficult issue around small boats, and in time, alongside others, actually be seen to deliver? Because that's going to be the key, isn't it? In the tussle with reform over boats, the wider question about the economy and money in people's pockets, that'll be the key thing in the end. And if the reshuffle, both of the cabinet and then within Number 10, and potentially if they get to this, the sharpening of the message, if those things can happen and contribute towards things that people can actually feel, then that's what it's for, isn't it? If it doesn't, it's kind of, people like us talking about the movement of people from one job to the other, with the potential that in the end it doesn't amount to much as far as people are concerned. Is it a means to an end, or does it not really change much? That's the ultimate test.
And Laura, the Reform UK conference has been taking place today. In fact, that's why you're in Birmingham, isn't it?
That's why I'm in Birmingham talking to you with my phone ballast on a bin.
On a bin. And we've had a question about that from newscaster Jordan. So let's have a listen to that.
Hi, James and the Newscast team. It's Jordan from Devon here. I'm intrigued by the timing of Keir Starmer's reshuffle this afternoon. Although partly influenced by Angela Rayner's resignation this lunchtime, did the government also see and decide to seize an opportunity to take control of the news cycle just before Nigel Farage was due to deliver his speech at the Reform UK Party conference in Birmingham? Thanks.
It's a great question, Jordan. And I was joking with a colleague this morning that actually, surely the announcement on Angela Rayner was going to come actually literally as Nigel Farage walked onto the stage to give his main speech this afternoon. In actual fact, it came this morning. I think there was a sense in Number 10 they just wanted to get on with this as quickly as they possibly could. I think also Laurie Magnus, the sleaze buster, was going on holiday. I'm sure I read that somewhere. I haven't double checked that fact, so don't quote me on that. Don't take that as gospel. But Chris, you might know if that's true or not. But there was definitely a sense they wanted to get on with it, get it out there before the weekend. There's also the timing of all the Sunday newspapers, of course. Could it have lasted through the weekend? They didn't want the situation to drag on for any longer than it absolutely had to. I think the junior ministerial jobs will always sorted out tomorrow, I think is the hope. And I think, don't prolong the horror, because in all this talk about the reshuffle, let's just go back to where we began. This was a dreadful row for any politician to be caught up into, let alone a Labour politician who made much of her name by calling out financial wrongdoing or embarrassment, or all of those by a whole succession of Tory politicians. So my feeling is it was a plaster and they wanted to rip it off as quickly as they could.
I think that's absolutely right. And Prime Minister pretty much said that to me when I was talking to him in Glasgow on Thursday, that moving quickly was good. It is what he said. That said, Jordan, it wasn't lost amongst those who were in the thick of all of this that, as it happens, the timing coincided with Nigel Farage's big moment in Birmingham. And of course, we saw Mr. Farage shuffle his speech, about 3 hours earlier than was intended, and about 45 minutes after Angela Rayner's resignation, as the reshuffle was underway. So there was a wry smile that the things were coinciding, but the principal reason was just them cracking on with it. They could not face any more days of headlines about Angela Rayner. They wanted it done, sorted, and then attempting to grapple some of the initiative with the wider reshuffle at the same time.
How was the speech, Laura?
The thing is, when you come to a Reform gathering, when Nigel Farage walks in, his supporters go completely wild. There are fireworks. The whole thing is completely unlike other political party conferences. I mean, I don't think the speech itself will go down as a sort of humdinger, history-making tenet that will be quoted in decades to come. But he obviously was able to use the whole Rayner mess as in a really convenient launching pad. His fundamental argument is Labour and the Tories are both sort of co-conspirators in a political broken system. And the whole mess around Rayner, which is about money and politics and people not quite paying enough attention to what they're up to, that just helped him make his argument here today. But he's also around tomorrow. We're speaking to him tomorrow for the programme on Sunday, so the conference isn't over, not despite the timing, which was both fortunate and unfortunate for both sides today in different ways.
Well, and on that, we're going to leave it. Laura, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Chris, nice to see you on a busy, busy day.
Cheers, James. Talk to you soon.